everyone. It seems like we don't have an audience, so we'll just wait until we get an audience and we'll talk via.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, mostrar and okay. How do we? Which one?
We want to do him like this.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Do him like this.
Okay. Hello. Okay, so we don't have an audience. That's just you.
Yeah, that's just me logging in.
Okay, so we'll just talk about nonsense.
Do we share it on Twitter?
I shared it on Twitter. Can you guys share it on Twitter? Matt, can you?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, tweet the URL for the YouTube and not our stream link because we don't want everyone to get on the stream.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, okay. Hello, Pentamilio. How are you doing? So I was in Ulyanovsk for a week and I got a lot of books. Ulyanovsk is the town where Lenin was born, and it was really good for my research. So this book is called V.I. Lenin, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And oh my God, it's so beautiful, the pictures here. I hope you guys can see it.
Let me see what you're doing. Yeah, we can get the gist.
Okay.
You're a little, it's a little but you can see it pretty well.
Okay, the pictures here are beautiful. Here is the introduction, but here's this Lenin, and the thing says Lenin in the near the bookshelf in his office in the Kremlin, October 16th, 1918. Photo by P. Atsupa. And this is the Red Guards in Smolny, which is near St. Petersburg. How do I do this? Let's see. This is the Petrograd soldiers and workers, soldiers and deputies. There's like some. Oh, okay.
We'll have to scan them, or you'll have to like share a couple of the pictures that we don't.
Oh yeah. It's really great. But and then in Ulyanovsk, I went to Lenin's bedroom, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I was in Lenin's bedroom, and that was just like too overwhelming for me. He was sleeping. He slept on a little bed in his bedroom. It was on the second floor, and I also took a selfie from Lenin's sister's mirror.
Yeah.
So the house he grew up in.
Yeah. It's a museum, and it's great. And
they haven't changed the wallpaper since 1901, like every other house in Russia.
Yep, exactly. It looks exactly like my wallpaper.
Yeah.
And I also learned. The coolest thing is I went to the headquarters of the Russian Social Democratic and Labor Party in Simbirsk, and they had a secret room where they did all their printing. And the funny thing is that the room was so secret that actually no one knew about it until 1956 when somebody accidentally. So it looks like it's like wood and there's nothing there. Like that's the end of the house. But when you under the wood, there's like a lock that you could open, and there they had their printing presses. And by printing presses, they literally had to put ink on typography and press.
Yeah.
It was like really hard work. Yeah.
And they had those, but we have those rooms because we want to booze. So
yeah, they're called speakeasies.
Oh yeah, but yeah, well, I mean, it is speakeasy because that way they could. And I learned that the way they did it is they helped make unions for workers who couldn't read or write, because in order to get all the union forms and stuff, like you needed to know how to read and write, and this wasn't very practical. So then, like, they helped make 4 unions. And then they started. They did a lot of stuff. So when then the Black Hundreds had their pogroms, they had a way to like militantly fight the Black Hundreds in the 1907, 1910, to the point where the Black Hundreds were scared to come to Simbirsk.
Good.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was saying that today, like, I feel like the white supremacists have been like kind of emboldened lately, and that we need to.
Well, Lenin. This is what Lenin would say: deport and shoot the white terrorists.
We need to.
That's exactly what he said to them.
More than we are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said to the white army. He said, "Deport and shoot the white terrorists." What else? And then the Volga is so beautiful. I took a little bit of a boat ride on the Volga, and then I was also remembering the barge haulers and being like, thank God that there aren't any more barge haulers like having to haul this boat up.
Yeah, exactly. I could just ride this boat and not have to pull it up the stream with my neck.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you said Volga, that's the first thing I always think of now is the pictures of them.
The boatmen.
Yeah. So then I also went to the Lenin's school, which is now like a creative art museum where they have like a lot of modern and Soviet art. And then it's really very interesting how much and in the town there's a big Tatar population, and there are so many mosques and churches, and so it's very interesting how multi-ethnic that town was.
Yeah.
So
what did you want to talk a little bit about? I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Bakhmut. Am I saying
sure. Okay. So it looks like Artemovsk, which is the Russian name, Artemovsk, which is the Russian name, and Bakhmut, which is allegedly the Ukrainian name, got conquered or surrounded by what is known as the Wagner Group. So what happened is that for the past almost 240 days, there have been intense ground like battle that's like old-fashioned World War II, World War I style trench warfare where it's like hand-to-hand combat. Yeah. And then it seems like maybe because of a lack of ammunition, maybe because of a lack of soldiers training, I don't know. The Ukrainian side decided to cut their losses and run after they were surrounded. So it seems like Bakhmut is in Russia's hands right now. And that is really important because there's 3 ways to get a supply to the Donbass, and all these 3 roads meet in Bakhmut. So without this, for Russia, what this means is that Ukraine can't send like arms to the paramilitary groups in the Donbass area. That just cuts it off. That's great because you don't want Tornado Battalion and Azov and Aidar and all the other scum to have weapons. So that's the best thing about it. And so with Ukraine, so it'll cut that off. That's the best thing. And it will make it easier to get, I believe Russia's goal, which I'm not 100% positive, is to get everything in the Black Sea, like after this, to get Odessa and then Transnistria. Yeah. And then cut off Ukraine's access to the Azov Sea. It's not Black Sea, I'm sorry, Azov Sea. Or Black Sea. I can't remember. But I could be wrong.
I think it's the Black Sea down there. But
Black Sea. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. It is the Black Sea. I got my seas confused. And so that is, I believe, is the goal, but I could be wrong.
I was listening to, I was on a Twitter space, and they were talking, a few guys were talking about all this, and they're ones that like research and look into it and everything. And I kept quiet on it, but like they kept saying, oh, Odessa's not important. And I'm like, from the beginning, I always thought Odessa was important. Like Odessa
is very important because it allows room to Transnistria, and it's a big port in the Black Sea.
Yeah, it's a major port.
Okay. By the way, I also got this. I couldn't resist.
What
is this? Is a word cloud of Lenin, and the most common word he used is learn.
Learn.
Yeah.
Interesting. So they have it in English? They had it in English?
No. I have it in Russian. I translated it for you.
But they were saying that, and they were saying like Kiev was very important. And I always thought
Kiev is in the middle of the like wheat fields. Yeah. Who cares?
I think they're thinking like because Kiev is more like
the capital city,
because it's the capital, it would be the the victor, like the
symbolic like the Berlin movement. moment.
But if they're like, I would think that they'd want to go down and get the whole Black Sea.
Yeah, that is my guess on what the goal is, and then get Transnistria on top of it, and then it'll be really a big blow to NATO. But again, this is my guess, nothing official. I haven't read anything. And what else? So, and then over the weekend, G7 has agreed to sell these F7 sell and train to Ukraine. But the thing is that when you read the fine print, it's going to be not ready for 6 to 9 months. So I don't know what the purpose of that is, and I'm trying to understand what their practical goal is in terms of Russia and China, because now they've been saber rattling on the Taiwan issue, and are they going to start a war? Do they need to start this? There's a lot of questions I have to ask.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You go, Matt.
Regarding Taiwan?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, they are absolutely trying to bait China into giving them any excuse to start a war.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Yeah. No, I mean, but it's like, is there a push to like end? Like they don't want their things split. Like they want to. Like I feel like they're pulling away from the Ukraine stuff. Like in the West, like they're. Oh, Zelensky's not doing this right. Like now, all of a sudden, you're seeing that in mainstream media, like where, hello, where Pilgrim.
Hello, where Pilgrim.
But like you're seeing almost like MSM in the United States kind of pull back and actually
say, well, I mean everything is going to take a backseat to China anyway. Like, yeah. So, and I mean, Ukraine, the whole Ukrainian thing was never winnable to start with. So
yeah.
Well, I think in the beginning they thought, okay, so I don't know what they, I think in the beginning they thought they would win Ukraine, but I don't understand why.
I think they thought Russia was never actually going to, like, we thought Russia, like, because they kept saying Russia's invading, and then they weren't invading. Right?
I know, but, okay, that's right. But okay, so the thing is that the State Department said something about Russia using crisis actors, and it sounded a lot like Alex Jones. But and then they were like saying Russia is building up troops in Russia.
Well, I mean, the State Department sounded a lot like Alex Jones because that's where Alex Jones gets his talking points.
He is the state.
No, I recently read from somebody that his dad is somehow connected to the CIA. I forgot how, but I will explain that. But he definitely gets money from the Koch brothers, because somebody once called him, one of his audience once called them about like the Koch brothers, and he's like, that's just left-wing conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Alex Jones talking about conspiracy theories? Come on.
He's all worried about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And AC Theron says he's just a character that, says these conspiracy theories. He doesn't really believe them. That's how he tried to get
away from the Sandy Hook lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is a character in that.
Well, I mean, it is an act. I mean, like what he does basically is he does the tinfoil hat shtick to implement the same business model as Oprah,
which is
selling absolute fucking
the Nutravitamins.
Yeah, he sells snake oil like that.
Yeah, nutraceuticals.
That's what Oprah does. Like,
okay.
But
she always pushes.
But she does it. She does it in the form of introducing the country to like Dr. Phil and garbage ass books.
Yeah,
she's the patron saint of believing anything Alex Jones is tinfoil hat and nutraceuticals, but it's the same business model.
Yeah,
you're right.
And it keeps everyone like not seeing what's actually happening.
Yeah. So that is but then but then once Russia invaded, it seems like Ukraine's only thing is to get other NATO countries to start. Well, like the only strategy Ukraine can do is the Venezuelan Gusano strategy, where they can get America and Britain and other NATO players to come and join World War III. And so that's the thing, is that Will they? I'm scared that they will, but that's a very scary thing to me.
Yeah. No, I mean they're saber rattling, like they're
Rishi Sunak.
But the same thing, like you think of this, like we all thought, they kept saying this, like they almost pushed Russia into this. Are they going to saber rattle World War III? You know what I mean? Like
probably.
Yeah.
For now, I especially what they're doing in the Taiwan and here, it's just very unsettling to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair.
Okay, so Matt, do you remember? Did we have a piece from last week? Did we finish it? What was going on?
I wasn't on last.
No, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, I wasn't here 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, right there, you just said it was 2 weeks ago, so I don't know why the hell you're asking me.
Okay, I don't. Okay, so
so 3 weeks ago, we were going to start this piece that was a long piece.
Okay, what was it?
Instead, read 2 pieces.
Okay, the split in the Socialist International.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Let me see.
Okay, just don't ask me to read anything because, like, my allergies have gone thermonuclear these last 3 days.
I know my nose is so itchy, but I'm all right.
Like, I need to get glasses anyway, I think. So.
But by the way, or should we just do Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky?
I mean, we read that probably like 2 years ago, but that's...
No, we did not. We never read Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky.
No?
It's a whole book.
Oh, all right. That's fine.
And then we can use this to make fun of Chomsky.
Okay, let me pull it up and I'll share it to everyone. And we'll start with that.
Yeah, so this is one of Lenin's, so this is Lenin's, one of Lenin's hyper-focus areas.
Oh, this was one that we talked about. Okay, we talked about doing this. This is why.
Yeah, well, it seems like appropriate in light of Chomsky's new revelations of like Epstein and what. And here's the thing, when Lenin was writing the Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky, it was not translated into the English and it was never made it to the US. And that is my theory of why Chomsky exists.
Yeah, and that's why we talked. That's what it is. We talked about it because we were saying how when Vigeland like brought up Kautsky as like someone to talk about, you had mentioned that it wasn't translated. I remember that you were mentioning how it wasn't translated right away. So a lot of Americans kind of fall back and think Kautsky was this wonderful person because
I mean, if you read Lenin, half of his pieces dissing Kautsky.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't read Lenin.
Yeah. Kautsky's so preface? What Kautsky what Kautsky did. Okay, so this is after the Bolshevik Revolution. Kautsky's pamphlet, The Dictatorship of the Proletariat, recently published in Vienna, is the most lucid example of that utter and ignominious bankruptcy of the Second International, about which all honest socialists in all countries have been talking for a long time. The proletarian revolution is now becoming a practical issue in a number of countries, and an examination of Kautsky's renegade sophistries and his complete renunciation of Marxism is therefore essential. First of all, it should be emphasized, however, that the present author has, from the very beginning of the war, repeatedly pointed to Kautsky's rupture with Marxism. And yes, Lenin has repeatedly talked about how much Kautsky sucks.
Yeah.
At length, yes.
That's what the State Revolution is about.
Yes, half of the articles Lenin writes is basically about how much Kautsky sucks. A number of articles published between 1914 and 1916 in Social Democrat and Communist Issues Abroad dealt with this subject. These articles were afterwards collected and published by the Petrograd Soviet under the title Against the Stream by Gregory Zinoviev and Lenin, which is Vladimir Lenin, Petrograd, 1918. In a pamphlet published in Geneva in 1915 and translated at the same time into German and French, I wrote about Kautskyism as follows. Kautsky, the leading authority in the Second International, is a most typical and striking example of how verbal recognition of Marxism has led into practice into its conversion into Struvism and into Bretonoism, i.e., into a bourgeoisie liberal theory recognizing a non-revolutionary class, struggle of the proletariat, which was expressed most clearly by Struve, the Russian writer, Brentano, the German economist. Another great example is Plekhanov. By the means of patent sophistry, Marxism is stripped of its revolutionary living spirit. Everything is recognized in Marxism except the revolutionary methods of struggle, the propaganda and preparation of those methods, and the education of the masses in this direction. Kautsky recognizes in the most unprincipled way the fundamental idea of social chauvinism, recognition of defense of the fatherland in the present war with a diplomatic sham concession to the left. His abstention from voting for war credits, his verbal claim to be in the opposition, etc. Kautsky, who in 1909 wrote a book on the approaching epoch of revolutions and on the connection between war and revolution. Kautsky, who in 1912 signed the Basel Manifesto on taking revolutionary advantage of the impending war, is outdoing himself in justifying and embellishing social chauvinism, and like Plekhanov, joins the bourgeoisie in ridiculing any thought of revolution and all steps towards the immediate revolutionary struggle. The working class cannot play its world revolutionary role unless it wages a ruthless struggle against this backsliding, spineless subservience to opportunism and unparalleled vulgarism of the theories of Marxism. Kautskyism is not fortuitous. It is the second product of the contradictions within the Second International, a blend of loyalty to Marxism in word and subordination to opportunism in deed. Gregory Zinoviev and Lenin, Socialism and War. Again, in my book, Imperialism, the Latest Stage of Capitalism, written in 1916, it was actually the highest stage, and published in Petrograd in 1917, I examined in details the theoretical fallacy of all Kautsky's arguments about imperialism. I quoted Kautsky's definition of imperialism. Imperialism is a product of highly developed industrial capitalism. It consists in the striving of every industrial capitalist nation to bring under its control or annex all large areas of agrarian territory, Kautsky's italics, irrespective of what nations inhabit it. I showed how utterly incorrect this definition was, or how it was adopted to the glossing over of the most profound contradictions of imperialism, and then to reconciliation with opportunism. I gave my own definition of imperialism. Imperialism is a capitalism at the stage of development at which the dominance of monopolies and finance capitals is established, at which the export of capital has acquired pronounced importance, at which the division of the world among the international trusts has begun, at which the division of all territories of the globe among big capitalist powers has been completed. I showed that Kautsky's critique of imperialism is on an even lower plane than the bourgeoisie Philistine critique. Finally, in August and September of 1917, that is before the proletarian revolution in Russia, I wrote a pamphlet published in Petrograd at the beginning of 1918 entitled The State and Revolution, the Marxist Theory of State and the Test of the Proletarian Revolution. In chapter 7 of this book entitled Vulgarism of Marxism by Opportunists, I devoted special attention to Kautsky, showing he had completely distorted Marxist ideas, tailoring them to suit opportunism. Opportunism, and that he had repudiated the revolution in deeds while accepting it in words. In substance, the chief theoretical mistake Kautsky makes in his pamphlet on the dictatorship of proletariat lies in those opportunist distortion of Marx's ideas on the state, and distortions which I expose in detail in my pamphlet, The State and Revolution. These preliminary remarks were necessary, for they show I openly accused Kautsky of being a renegade long before the Bolsheviks assumed state power, and were condemned by him on that account. Yeah. And this is why I know Chomsky hasn't pretended to read State and Revolution and hasn't really read it, because he talked about like Lenin having some anarchist ideas in State and Revolution. And then I'm like, no, where are you getting that? You haven't.
Yeah. I just have something that I was just thinking about like, he wrote a hell of a lot between 1918 and his death.
No. Actually, I have between October and July of 1917. No, between April and July of 1917, he wrote 170 articles.
Wow. I'm just I'm like, wow. It's like seems like it's like so.
Yeah. He has a lot of energy. And so April is when he came back here to Petrograd. he like snuck on the train and almost got caught because he got into an argument with the lady. But then when he came, there was a big crowd welcoming him, and he gave an impromptu speech, and then he went into hiding here. Actually, he did the hiding not too far from where I am, but I'll anyways, so when he does that, he realizes that a lot of people are okay. So they have abdicated the czar, and then the interim government is promising to have a constituent assembly. But what happens is that the allies know that the minute Russia has an actual constituent assembly, they're going to say goodbye to World War I, and the allies really need Russia to be there. So they won't actually let the Juan Guaido in charge to actually have a constituent assembly. So the first time they'll say it's in July, and then they postpone it. So Lenin has to like explain to the people that there will be no constituent assembly because these Milyukovs, the Guchkovs, the Kerenskys are just useless puppets of the West. Oh, by the way, I just learned that Kerensky is also from Ulyanovsk, and his dad was actually Lenin's teacher too. And his dad wrote the letter of recommendation for Lenin to go to university.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then Kerensky had to escape in a dress. And then he died in 1970 at the age of 90. And I'm like, why does Kerensky get to live so long and so short?
Only the good die young.
I know. It's like, wait a minute, like, what? Anyways, he lived in New York for a long time, but. So that's what he does. And eventually in July of 1917, they have a big strike. And then the Tsar's guards end up having like a shootout of the people. And that's when people realized, oh my God, yes. The Tsar's, Kerensky's guard, Tsar's guard, they just realized that just because the Tsar abdicated doesn't mean Russia is actually a republic when you have the same people in charge. Yeah. And then that's when they start getting ready for the October Revolution, where they need to put it in the hands of the Soviets. And what they realize is that in some cities, like basically Petrograd, Moscow, and like some cities along this line, the Soviets are actually in power because they're actually doing things like making sure there's food, giving community services, post offices, and things like that. So those are the places where it's easiest to grab power. And then there's the place where there's the stronghold of czars, of czarist autocracy, and that is like, say, in Galicia, which is now Ukraine, some places in Siberia, in the Caucasus, and things like that. So that's where the war happens. But yeah, Lenin did have a lot of energy. He communicated a lot. He had lots and lots and lots and lots of energy, and he wrote a lot during this time.
Yeah.
No, so in fact, if you look at the collected works, 1917 is around 30, and it ends at around 50. So a lot of it is like sample laws, how to, and then I love his petty letters, and a lot of it is just like stopping shit from hitting the ceiling.
Oh, my window's open, so I have the trucks going by. Do you want to keep reading? You want me to?
Yeah, I can keep reading.
Okay.
How Kautsky turned Marx into a common liberal. The fundamental question that Kautsky discusses in his pamphlet is that of the very essential proletarian revolution, namely the dictatorship of the proletariat. This is a question that is of greatest importance for all countries, especially for the advanced ones, especially for those at war, and especially at the present time. One may say without fear of exaggeration that this is the key problem of the entire proletarian class struggle. It is therefore necessary to pay particular attention to it. Kautsky formulates the question as follows. The contrast between two socialist trends, the Bolsheviks and non-Bolsheviks. So anyway, the thing about this that's really funny is that there's no such thing as a non-Bolshevik socialist trend. That's just capitulation to the bourgeoisie. Is the contrast between two radically different methods, the dictatorial method and the democratic. Okay, just so you know, Kautsky's party in 1933 like come together and sing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles while clapping to Hitler. And that's
how much did capitalism, like were what he's calling non-Bolsheviks, that Kautsky, were they like in favor of moving towards more capitalism, or?
No, they wanted to do it using bourgeoisie parliamentarianism and slowly, surely do it eventually, which eventually will never happen.
But that would have just let capitalism creep in,
And that's exactly what happened in Weimar Germany, and then we all saw what happened with Hitler.
Yeah. All right.
And that is Kautsky's party, just so we know.
Yeah.
Let us point in passing that when calling the non-Bolsheviks in Russia, i.e. the Mensheviks, the Socialist Revolutionary, the Socialists, Kautsky was guided by their name. That is, by a word, not by the actual place they occupy in the struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. And that's because the Mensheviks none of these people didn't really want a revolution. They just wanted to be in Kerensky's government and kind of slowly push Russia towards whatever crap. And so that's what Lenin is making fun of. What a wonderful understanding and application of Marxism, but more of this later. For the moment, we must deal with the main point, namely with Kautsky's great discovery of the fundamental contrast between the democratic and dictatorial methods. That is the crux of the matter, and that is the essence of Kautsky's pamphlet. And that is such an awful theoretical muddle, such a complete renunciation of Marxism that Kautsky must be confessed has far exceeded Bernstein. The question of the dictatorship of the proletariat is a question of relation of the proletariat state to the bourgeoisie state, of proletarian democracy to bourgeoisie democracy. One would think this is as plain as a pikestaff. But Kautsky, like a schoolmaster who has become as dry as dust from quoting the same old textbooks on history, persistently turns his back on the 20th century to his face to the 18th century, and for the 100th time in a number of paragraphs, in an incredibly tedious fashion, choose the old cud over the relationship of bourgeoisie democracy to absolutism and medievalism. So here, yeah. So basically, Kautsky in his pamphlet is comparing bourgeoisie democracy to medieval era. And yes, that sounds better. But then he's like, wait a minute. Lenin's like, we're in the 20th century. Why are you comparing it with like things that are happening in the 13th century? Compare it with.
Yeah, it kind of does go back to like when I said, like, were they worried about capital? Like it seems like Lenin, knew this beast was growing and growing and growing, and Kautsky was not paying attention to it. And that
no, I think he was, but he was an opportunist, and he wanted to side with the victors.
Yeah. Okay.
He was very smart. He knew it. I mean, it sounds like he was chewing rags in his sleep. But this means he utterly fails to understand what is what. One cannot help smiling at Kautsky's effort to make it appear that there are people who preach contempt for democracy, and so forth. That is the sort of twaddle Kautsky uses to befog and confuse the issue, for he talks like the liberals, speaking of democracy in general and not of bourgeoisie democracy. And that's exactly it. Whenever the US says democracy, they mean capitalism. And so whenever you say that's why Juan Guaido is a pro-democracy candidate, even though he is like, no one ever elected him to anything important, anything ever.
Yeah. Totally missing what the word democracy means.
Exactly. He even avoids using this precise class term and instead tries to speak about pre-socialist democracy. This windbag devotes almost 1/3 of his pamphlet, 20 pages out of 63, to this twaddle, which is so agreeable to the bourgeoisie, for it is tantamount to embellishing bourgeoisie democracy and obscures the question of the proletarian revolution. But after all, the title of Kautsky's pamphlet is The Dictatorship of the Proletariat. Everybody knows that this is the very essence of Marx's doctrine. After a lot of irrelevant twaddle, Kautsky was obligated to quote Marx's words on the dictatorship of the proletariat. But the way in which he lists Marxists did it was simply farcical. Listen to this. This view, which Kautsky dubs as contempt for democracy, rests upon a single word of Karl Marx's. This is what Kautsky literally says on page 20. And on page 60, the same thing is repeated, even in the form that they, the Bolsheviks, opportunely recalled the little word. That is literally what he says, des Wortchens, about the dictatorship of the proletariat. Marx once used in 1875 in a letter. Here is Marx's little word. Between capitalist and communist society lies a period of the revolutionary transformation of the one into another. Corresponding to this is a political transition period in which the state can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. And so I already wrote an article about this. The dictatorship of the proletariat means that the will of the proletariat prevails over capital every single time. Capital can never overrule the will of the people. So an example is fracking. Every time a city bans fracking, the U.S. comes and like says, "Hey, we can't ban fracking," by the state. So that's an example of a dictatorship of the capital. In a dictatorship of the proletariat, that would not happen.
Yeah, I think like what Marx was trying to do, like you know how like the right wing always like uses words, and I think that people look at dictatorship of the proletariat and they're like, dictatorship, like what the hell? I mean, like when they're not, you know, they're just coming to leftism or something like that, and they don't really get it. I remember we had someone on the show that was like, "What are you talking about?" Like so upset. We're trying to explain it to them, but yeah, I mean, it's almost like he wanted to use that word because it was like, okay, well, you guys are all dictators, then let the workers be the dictators. Like,
exactly. And democracy is all wishy squishy and it means a lot of bullshit things. So he wanted to be like dictatorship of the proletariat. Yes. The work, whatever the workers say happens, and their word is the rule of law.
Yes.
So ExxonMobil doesn't get to lobby. I don't know.
Exactly. Oh, and that's just a quick note on that. Like, I saw like a tweet of someone from the UK saying the NHS, like they're trying to now allow insurance companies in England, like, or the UK actually, to give money to politicians now.
Oh my God.
Now, and now they're going to, they want to start giving money.
Okay. I was reading Asa Winsley's book on weaponizing anti-Semitism and how they use that against Corbyn. And on the plane, every other word out of my mouth was motherfucker.
Yeah, I saw your tweet on that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get very angry about it. It's gonna. I can see my anger just boiling up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's not getting pretty out there. It's getting worse.
No.
What do we got going here?
Okay. Okay. First of all, to call this classical reasoning of Marx's, which sums up the whole of his revolutionary teaching, a single word or even a little word, is an insult to and complete renunciation of Marxism. It must not be forgotten that Kautsky knows Marx almost by heart, and judging by all he has written, he has in his desk or in his head a number of pigeonholes in which all that was ever written by Marx is most carefully filled so as to be ready at hand for quotation. Kautsky must know that both Marx and Engels in their letters as well as their published works repeatedly spoke about the dictatorship of the proletariat before and especially after the Paris Commune. Kautsky must know that the formula dictatorship of the proletariat is merely a more historical, concrete, and scientifically exact formulation of the proletariat's task of smashing the bourgeoisie state machine, about which both Marx and Engels, in summing up the experience of the Revolution of 1848 and still more so of 1871, spoke for 40 years between 1852 and 1891. How is this monstrous distortion of Marxism by that Marxist pedant Kautsky to be explained? As far as the philosophical roots of this phenomenon are concerned, it amounts to the substitution of eclecticism and sophistry for dialectics. Kautsky is a past master at this sort of substitution. Regarded from the point of view of practical politics, it amounts to subservience to opportunists, that is, in the last analysis, to the bourgeoisie. Since the outbreak of war, Kautsky has made increasingly rapid progress in this art of being a Marxist in words and a lackey of the bourgeoisie in deeds until he has become a virtuoso at it. Oh, by the way, Lenin's sister had a piano. She used to play the piano. I saw their piano in the house. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, you know how like we're always like someone that like kind of takes the whole line of the state, like pushing like, oh, you know, I'm a socialist, but we should like vote for this person because
oh my God, they are the word. It's like you're not a socialist if you are saying that, hey, I'm a socialist, but let's vote for Hillary. Like, especially if you think voting really matters in a bourgeoisie election in the US, it has any practical consequence. Like, that's the thing, is that if you are a socialist, you should be talking about unionizing, making like a tenants union, an unemployed workers council, unemployed council. So anything that has like collective some way for the people to and form a strategy to fight power. And if you're just like obsessed about bourgeoisie elections, I'm going to have to question your socialist credentials.
Yeah. But like so many people, like you see them on Twitter, like, you're a psyop because you're saying that. No, they're just either stupid or they're, but like, I wonder if like right now, if Kautsky was living right now and he's like totally destroying the words that Marx puts out, people would be like, you're a psyop.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what he was doing mostly. I mean, and the really horrible thing about it is that the bourgeoisie are scorpions. So his wife died in Auschwitz, and he died penniless in exile. Yeah. And so it's like he didn't even get anything for betraying the whole world and being responsible for World War II.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Jacobin, oh my God, Jacobin. How many articles, Matt, do you have any idea how many articles they write about how Kautsky's awesome?
I think it's like 2 pages.
No, 2 pages worth of articles?
Yeah, that's in like a list.
Holy F.
So there's at least, so
it might actually be more.
Holy God, how do you write that many articles about Kautsky when Lenin explains why he sucks?
Because that's where like the psyop is.
What psyop?
Is Jacobin trying to rehabilitate Kautsky?
It's never going to happen. Where
people like Emma Biglin, picking up, and then she starts, Kautsky's the way we should look. We shouldn't look at like Lenin or Stalin.
Kautsky, okay, I mean, seriously, have you guys not seen what happened to Germany in 1933?
Nope. The 1930s Germany just like seemed to poof out of the brains of middle class bourgeoisie people. Like I
know, like so if you look at what happened between 1933 and 1945, you know that Kautsky's way is not the way to go.
Exactly.
Yeah, but like you see, like Nazi Germany didn't happen because of any particular reason. It's just that there's evil that just exists. And like it pops in and out of existence at randoms, just so the good guys can demonstrate who the good guys are.
She had a Cobra Commander comment. Kautsky is a Fed jacketed and a simp, Lenin, if he had Twitter.
Probably. Yeah.
All right, where are
we? 40 years. How is this monstrous distortion of Marxism by that? Okay. As far as regarded from this point of view of practical politics, it amounts to subservience to the opportunists. It is in the last analysis to the bourgeoisie. Since the outbreak of the war, Kautsky has made increasingly rapid virtuoso of it. Okay. One feels even more convinced of this when examining the remarkable way in which Kautsky interprets Marx's little word about the dictatorship of the proletariat. Listen to this. Marx unfortunately neglected to show us in greater detail how he conceived this dictatorship. It's just, there's nothing to conceive. It's just the will of the proletariat is always implemented as policy. Right?
Yeah.
This is an utterly mendacious phrase of a renegade, for Marx and Engels gave us indeed quite a number of the most detailed indications in which Kautsky, the Marxist pedant, has deliberately ignored. Literally, the word dictatorship means abolition of democracy. But of course, taken literally, this word also means undivided rule of a single person, unrestricted by any laws, an autocracy, which differs from despotism only insofar as it is not meant as a permanent state institution, but as a transient emergency measure. The term dictatorship of the proletariat, hence not the dictatorship of a single individual, but a class, ipso facto, precludes the possibility that Marx in this connection had in mind a dictatorship in the literal sense of the term. He speaks not of a form of government, but a condition which must necessarily arise whenever the proletariat has gained political power. That Marx, in this case, did not have in mind a form of government is proved by the fact that he was of the opinion that in Britain and America, the transition might take place peacefully, i.e. in a democratic way. But by peacefully, he means It's never peaceful. I mean, the countries where it has happened via bourgeoisie parliamentarianism, Venezuela and Bolivia, what happened is that they got elected, but then afterwards came the counter-revolution, the violent death squads, the civil war, the Nazis.
And Britain and America were behind that.
Yeah, good point. Excellent point. So I mean, those are the only two places where I've seen it, but the violence happens after. Instead of having a violence before taking power, it just happens after. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened in Russia too. The seizure of power by the Bolsheviks was bloodless. All the violence was the Russian Civil War that came after, when 15 different countries invaded them.
Yep.
Or at the very least, gave
invaded. No. 15 different countries' militaries definitely invaded. 14 different, at least, invaded them. They also they did a little bit of all, and then they funded Denikin. What's his name? Kolchak, Denikin, Baron Mannerheim, the Polish guy, Pilsudski.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have deliberately coded this argument in full so that the reader may clearly see the methods Kautsky, the theoretician, employs. Kautsky chose to approach the question in such a way as to begin with the definition of the word dictatorship. Very well. Everyone has a sacred right to approach a question in whatever way he pleases. Only must distinguish a serious and honest approach from a dishonest one. Anyone who wants to be serious in approaching the question in this way ought to give his own definition of the word. But then the question would be put fairly and squarely. But Kautsky does not do that. Literally, he writes, the word dictatorship means abolition of democracy. In the first place, this is not a definition. If Kautsky wanted to avoid giving a definition of the concept of dictatorship, why did he choose this particular approach to the question? Secondly, it is obviously wrong. It is natural for a liberal to speak of democracy in general, but a Marxist will never forget to ask, for what class? Everyone knows, for instance, and Kautsky the historian knows it too, that rebellions and even strong ferment among the slaves in ancient times at once revealed the fact that the ancient state was essentially a dictatorship of these slave owners, kind of like the US.
Yes.
Did this dictatorship abolish democracy among and for the slave owners? Everybody knows it did not. Kautsky, the Marxist, has made this monstrously absurd and untrue statement because he forgot the class struggle. To transform Kautsky's liberal and false assertion into a Marxist and true one must say, dictatorship does not mean the abolition of democracy for the class that exercises the dictatorship over the other classes, but it does mean the abolition or the very material restriction, which is also a form of abolition of democracy, for the class over which or against which the dictatorship is exercised. However true this assertion may be, it does not give us a definition of dictatorship. Let's examine Kautsky's next sentence. But of course, taken literally, this word also means undivided rule of a single person restricted by any laws. Like a blind puppy sniffing at random, first in one direction and then in another, Kautsky accidentally stumbles upon one true idea, namely the dictatorship is rule unrestricted by any laws. Nevertheless, he failed to give a definition of dictatorship, and moreover, he made an obvious historical blunder, namely that dictatorship means rule of a single person. This is even grammatically incorrect, since dictatorship may be also exercised by a handful of persons or by an oligarchy or by a class. And this is also another thing, is that when you are of the bourgeoisie class and you look at illiterate peasants, people don't think that they're capable of actually having independent thought. So it's always the conspiracy theory that they're being hypnotized by this one evil man, as opposed to, oh my God, I was a slave owner and I was horrible and everyone hates me.
I just read, and I didn't know it was coming out as a movie. I didn't know, but Killers of the Flower Moon. And that was one of the things. The Osage people had all that money because they were pushed onto this land that had oil, which, they didn't know there was oil there when they pushed them on the land. So they were the richest people at this time. We're talking about 1920. They were the richest people in the world. Are we talking about? Osage.
The who?
The Native Americans, Osage.
Osage, okay.
And they were all millionaires, and it was they had to have, either the women had to marry a white man, or they had to have a white person control their money because they couldn't, they weren't allowed to control it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but that's basically where the idea of like dictatorship comes from. And then when you really look at actual Soviet Union, it's so disorganized. Like there's no way like one person from above could like do anything because it was like everything was shit hitting the ceiling all the time. It was like so disorganized.
But if you look at the richest people in the world, they're some of the stupidest. So
Elon
it's not
Musk.
like the poorest person could be the smartest person in the world. Like
I know, but when you have to, you have to navigate the world and solve actual problems, so you have more practice.
Yeah. So do you either the history of the founding of Mensa?
No.
Okay, so basically, the TLDR of it all was that the two guys who founded it ended up leaving their own club because they were disappointed that most of their members ended up that like passed their intelligence exams. One guy left because he was annoyed that they all seemed more interested in solving puzzles than actual problems.
But isn't that what Mensa is?
And the other guy left because he was angry that all these smart people were poor and not rich.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and now I mean it's like it's funny that like people will still use it as like this metric for intelligence. Like they have like 5 billion members.
I mean, but if it's like a chess club or like some puzzle club, I'm okay with them. Like,
it is a fraternal organization that is open to anyone that scores in, I think it's the top 2% of a specific intelligence exam. And like really, it's pointless because you have absolutely nothing to gain by getting into it and everything to lose by being rejected from it. And plus you can you could take this test infinite amount of time. So but it's really like not for like it's basically like just for people that have like something to prove, essentially.
Okay, so they even make bad friends, so it's not even like a chess club.
No, I mean it's just like it's like the Elks or like something like that, but for like smart people that or like at least relatively smart people that have accomplished like nothing else and really need this.
Okay.
Okay, where were we?
We were reading Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky. Oh, okay. Okay, blind puppy sniffing. That's where we were. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Nevertheless, he failed to give a definition of dictatorship, and moreover, he made an obvious historical. No. Okay, we finished it. Kautsky goes on to point out the difference between dictatorship and despotism. But although what he says is obviously incorrect, we shall not dwell upon it. It is wholly irrelevant to us, to the question that interests us. Oh wow, this is like some good restraint for Lenin for not going off on a tangent on this. Good point. Everyone knows Kautsky's inclination to turn from the 20th century to the 18th century and from the 18th century to classical antiquity. We hope that the German proletariat, after it has attained its dictatorship, will bear this inclination of his in mind and appoint him, say, the teacher of ancient history at some gymnasium. By gymnasium, he means high school. Try to evade a definition of the dictatorship of the proletariat by philosophizing about despotism is either crass stupidity or a very clumsy trick. As a result, we find that having undertaken to discuss the dictatorship, Kautsky rattled off a great deal of manifest of lies, but has given no definition. Yet, instead of relying on his mental faculties, he could have used his memory to extract from the pigeonhole all the instances in which Marx speaks of dictatorship. Had he done so, he would certainly have arrived at either of the following definition or at one in substance coinciding with it. Dictatorship is rule based directly upon force and restricted by any laws. Revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat is rule one and maintained by the use of violence, and by the proletariat against the bourgeoisie rule that is unrestricted by any laws. This simple truth, a truth that is plain as pikestaff to every class-conscious worker who represents the people, and not an upper section of the petty bourgeoisie scoundrels who have been bribed by the capitalists, such as are the social imperialists of all countries. This truth, which is obvious to every representative of the exploited classes, fighting for their emancipation, to this truth, which is beyond dispute for every Marxist, has to be extracted by force from the most learned Mr. Kautsky. How is it to be explained? Simply by that spirit of servility with which the leaders of the Second International, who have become contemptible sycophants in the service of the bourgeoisie, are imbued. Kautsky first committed a sleight of hand by proclaiming the obvious nonsense that the word dictatorship in the literal sense means the dictatorship of the single person. And then, on the strength of this sleight of hand, he declared that hence Marx's word about the dictatorship of a class were not meant in the literal sense, but one in which dictatorship does not imply revolutionary violence.
Yeah, because, if there's one thing that, Marx was known for, it was speaking in metaphors.
Exactly.
Ridiculous. When you say, social imperialists, does he use that term a lot?
Yeah. So in the Second International, there was a split essentially between European countries and the rest of the country on World War I. So we all know about World War I is so that Britain and Germany can fight over who gets to control the oil in Turkey, which Lenin said, and every war after that too, if you understand where the Ottoman Empire was. So the social imperialists did not want to end the practice of colonialism. They wanted to support their own national bourgeoisie in World War I.
So basically, in short for that is they were far behind Robespierre in the 1790s.
Exactly. Opportunists. And in fact, right when the Bolshevik Revolution happened, there was a moment when everything could have collapsed and we could have a global proletariat. But yeah. But if it weren't for the fucking white people.
I'll be right back. I just got to bring my dad's lunch up. Hold on.
All right.
Okay. Let me continue to read. I forgot where I was. But in one which dictator does not imply revolutionary violence, but peaceful winning of the majority under bourgeoisie, mark you, democracy. And of course, under bourgeoisie, majority democracy, there every single day there is so much violence, that. But the reason why the dictatorship of the proletariat offends rich people is that it's never directed towards them, so they're more offended by this. Yeah. One must, if you please, distinguish between a condition and a form of government. A wonderfully profound distinction. It is like drawing a distinction between the condition of a stupidity of a man who reasons foolishly and the form of his stupidity. Lenin is really not giving any F's, right?
Yeah, he's not fucking around here.
Yeah. Kautsky finds it necessary to interpret dictatorship as a condition of domination. This is the literal expression he uses on the very next page, page 21, because revolutionary violence and violent revolution disappear. The condition of domination is a condition in which any majority finds itself under democracy, and thanks to such a fraud, revolutionary happily disappears. And of course, who started the violence? It is not the proletariat. The proletariat literally wrote a letter saying, "Dear respected Father Tsar, we are starving. Give us more money for our slave work." And then it was the Tsar who went and got boom, 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 boom. Right?
Yep.
So that's the thing that proletariats always come with a request, and the violence, and they're not the ones with the guns, not with the 4 million black hundreds, whatever. The fraud, however, is too crude and will not save Kautsky. One cannot hide the fact that dictatorship presupposes and implies a condition, one so disagreeable to renegades of revolutionary violence of one class against another. It is patently absurd to draw a distinction between a condition and a form of government. To speak of forms of government in this connection is terribly stupid. For every schoolboy knows that a monarchy and a republic are two different forms of government. It must be explained to Kautsky that both these forms of government, like all transitional forms of government under capitalism, are only variations of the bourgeoisie state, that is, a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Exactly. So the difference between France and England, for example, monarchy, republic.
I wanted to also bring up when you were saying like that whole thing, like we write the letter and say, please, sir, can you like be nice and not make us work 50 hours a day? They want us to be civil, but then they react on us acting civilly, like us asking for healthcare and telling us that's unicorns, that we're like crazy, and that so they act uncivil to us and they expect us
Exactly. They will mow you down like that. They will mow you down and go bing, bang, bang. Exactly. So it's the whole civility is BS because the violence is always started by the bourgeoisie.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, to speak of forms of government is not only stupid, but also a very crude falsification of Marx, who was very clearly speaking here of this or that form or type of state, and not of forms of government. The proletarian revolution is impossible without the forcible destruction of the bourgeoisie state machine and the substitution for it of a new one, which, in the words of Engels, is no longer a state in the proper sense of the word. Because of his renegade position, Kautsky has to befog and belie all this. Look at what wretched subterfuge he uses. First subterfuge. That Marx, in this case, did not have in mind a form of government is proved by the fact that he was in the opinion that in Britain and America, the transition might take place in a democratic way. The form of government has absolutely nothing to do with it, for there are monarchies which are not typical of the bourgeoisie state. Such, for instance, they have no military clique. There are republics which are quite typical in this respect. For instance, they have a military clique and a bureaucracy. This is a universally known history and political fact, and Kautsky cannot falsify it. If Kautsky wanted to argue in a serious and honest manner, he would have asked himself, are there historical laws relating to revolution which know of no exception? The reply would have been, no, there are no laws. Such laws apply to typical, to what Marx once termed the ideal, meaning average, normal, typical capitalism. Further, was there in the 70s anything which made England and America exceptional in regard to what we are discussing now? It will be obvious to anyone at all familiar to the requirements of science in regard to problems of history that this question must be put. To fail to put it in tantamount and to falsifying science to engaging in sophistry. And the question having been put, there can be no doubt as to the reply. The revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat is violence against the bourgeoisie. And the necessity of such violence is particularly called for, as Marx and Engels have repeatedly explained in detail, especially in the Civil War in France and in the preface to it. But by existence of militarism and bureaucracy. It is precisely these institutions that were non-existent in Britain and America in the 70s when Marx made this observation. They do exist now in Britain and America. Kautsky has to resort to trickery literally at every step to cover up his apostasy. Note how he inadvertently betrayed his cloven hoof. Wait, does cloven hoof mean he's a goat or he's a cow?
They both have cloven hooves. It means even-toed undulates.
It's also like they'll use it like the devil.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But he's also comparing him to a cow because like he referred to Kautsky
chewing cud.
His reactionary tendencies as chewing the old cud. So he's basically calling him a cow devil.
Okay. He wrote peacefully, i.e. in a democratic way. In defining dictatorship, Kautsky tried his utmost to conceal from the reader the fundamental feature of this concept, namely revolutionary violence. But now the truth is out. It is a question of contrast between peaceful and violent revolutions. That is the crux of the matter. Kautsky has to resort to all these subterfuges, sophistries, and falsifications only to excuse himself from violent revolution and to conceal his renunciation of it, his desertion to the side of the liberal labor policy, to the side of the bourgeoisie. That is the crux of the matter. And look at what kind of violence was unleashed in Germany when there was no violent revolution in 1918.
Yeah.
1933 to 1945.
The only reason to just say, well, no, it's all going to be nonviolent and it's all going to be is to appease the people that you're against. And
exactly. And when you don't
understand that we are willing to go that far Sure, if we could get something non-violently, yeah, let's do it. But we'll take it further.
Exactly. And like I said, there's no such thing as nonviolence, because look at Germany as 1933.
Well, like what are you talking about? Like non-violent, like it's like when people talk about
inconveniencing the bourgeoisie in the most.
When people talk about non-violence, like in the United States, like it doesn't make any fucking sense.
No, it just
like
means
our police force kills more people in a week than the police force of any other quote unquote industrialized nation.
No, not even industrialized countries.
It kills in decades.
Yeah. Not even industrialized countries. Even like most most underdeveloped countries, their police force does not kill more than like 1 or 2 people per year.
Yeah, and you can't be the non-violent to their violence. I mean, they show violence. We can't just stop at the door of non-violence. Like it will just be mowed down.
I mean, the police force, the deaths of the U.S. is like equivalent to war zone deaths, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like 3,000 people a year at minimum, and that's just the people that
we know about.
No, not that we know about. That are killed by firearms. It doesn't count the people that are beaten to death, that are killed by quote unquote non-lethals.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Like taser and have a heart attack, or yeah.
Oh yeah. And then also the ones we don't know about because it's not on video or whatever. The police
or they hide
body well or whatever.
Right.
Okay. In defining dictatorship, Kautsky tried his utmost to conceal from the reader the fundamental feature of this concept, namely revolutionary violence. But the truth is out now. It is a question of contrast between peaceful and violent revolutions. That is the crux of the matter. Kautsky has to resort to all these subterfuges, sophistries, and falsifications only to excuse himself from violent revolution. Oh, no, we already did this. Okay. And yeah, ultimately, what happens is that when you read New York Times, they're really offended when like somebody throws an egg at Margaret Thatcher, but they don't care that she like stole like 1 million liters of milk from babies and all these babies that died of malnourishment, right?
Yeah.
Kautsky, the historian, is so shamelessly falsifies history that he forgets that the fundamental fact that pre-monopoly capitalism, which actually reached its zenith in the 70s, was by virtue of its fundamental economic traits, which found most typical expression in Britain and in America, distinguished by a, relatively speaking, maximum fondness for peace and freedom. Imperialism, on the other hand, i.e. monopoly capitalism, which finally only matured in the 20th century, is by virtue of its economic traits distinguished by a minimum fondness for peace and freedom and by a maximum and universal development of militarism. We need to save this quote somehow.
A minimum fondness for
peace and freedom. Like this, doesn't this describe Britain and America like to the T? And maximum and yeah, minimum fondness for peace and freedom, and by maximum and universal development of militarism. It's so beautiful. To fail to notice this in discussing the extent to which peaceful or violent revolution is typical or probable is to stoop to the level of the most ordinary lackey of the bourgeoisie. Second subterfuge. The Paris Commune was a dictatorship of the proletariat, but it was elected by universal suffrage, i.e. without depriving the bourgeoisie of franchise, i.e. democratically. And Kautsky says triumphantly, the dictatorship of the proletariat was for Marx, or according to Marx, a condition which necessarily follows from pure democracy, if the proletariat forms the majority. And again, losers, these lasted for 3 weeks, okay. This argument of Kautsky's is so amusing that only truly suffers from veritable embarrassed-richness, embarrassment due to wealth and of objections that can be made to it. Firstly, it is well known that the flower, the general staff, the upper sections of the bourgeoisie had fled from Paris to Versailles. In Versailles, there was a socialist, Louis Blanc, which, by the way, proves the falsity of Kautsky's assertion that all trends of socialism took part in the Paris Commune. Is it not ridiculous to represent the division of the inhabitants of the Paris into two belligerent camps, one which embraced the entire militant and politically active section of the bourgeoisie as pure democracy and with universal suffrage? Secondly, Paris Commune waged war against Versailles as the workers' government of France against the bourgeoisie government. What have pure democracy and universal suffrage have to do with it? When Paris was deciding the fate of France, when Marx expressed the opinion that the Paris Commune had committed a mistake in failing to seize the bank, which belonged to the whole of France, he did not proceed from the principles and practice of pure democracy. Now, Marx proceeded from the principle of not being utter losers.
Let's not lose sight of the fact that the Paris Commune was a bunch of unwashed French people blocking a road for 2.5 months.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Thirdly, I would respectfully remind Mr. Kautsky, who has Marx and Engels off pat, of the following appraisal of the Paris Commune given by Engels from the point of view of pure democracy. My favorite Engels article, which some people seem to think is a book, even though it's 4 pages long.
Oh yeah, that's it's not even like, I mean, in like large print, you might get 2.5 pages out of it.
Okay. Have these gentlemen, the anti-authoritarians, ever have seen a revolution? A revolution is certainly the most authoritarian thing there is. It is an act whereby one part of the population imposes its will upon the other by the means of rifles, bayonets, and cannons, all by which are highly authoritarian means. And the victorious party must maintain its rule by means of the terror which its arms inspire in the reactionaries. Would the Paris Commune have lasted more than a day if it had not used the authority of the armed people against the bourgeoisie? Cannot we, on the contrary, blame it for having too little use of that authority? Yes.
Yep.
Here is your pure democracy. How Engels would have ridiculed the vulgar petty bourgeoisie, the social democrat in the French sense of the 40s and in the general European sense of 1914 to 1918, who took it into his head to talk about pure democracy in a class-divided society. But that's not enough.
I wanted to say that if we blame Stalin for not killing enough Nazis, then we definitely gotta blame them.
Blame who?
Well, you were at.
I do this. I do this, like, I go through this like all the time. Like, I'll mention something about what you see. Like, I think one of the crowning achievements of humanity is the creation of the guillotine, and every time I bring that up, there's invariably at least like one or two jackasses that mention smugly how the Paris Commune like rejected the use of the guillotine, and it's like, well, yeah, how'd that work out for them?
Yeah, I don't know why they keep like talking about some losers in Europe. Victims of communism was having. We personally ratioed victims of communism twice this week.
They are my absolute hands.
They're so
down,
easy.
Hands down, my most ratioed Twitter account.
I know. Okay, so basically, the first one is Stalin killed millions, and we were like, yeah, millions of Nazis.
Yeah.
And then the second one was this guy from Romania who was crying about how he was sent into a gulag, even though there was no gulag in 1960 when he was sent. And then his crime was like smuggling weapons to Nazi terrorists. And then inside the gulag, all they did is like they made him like read some books on World War II history on why it was like bad to like arm Nazi terrorists.
Oh my God, they made him learn history? That's horrible.
Yeah, and then like then his entire like memoir is like a joke. He's like, my aunt's estate was confiscated. They took all her slaves.
They took my racehorse.
Yeah,
it literally says that they took the racehorse for themselves.
Oh, and then his dad was a general in Antonescu's army, who was like
his father was a right-hand man for Michael the First.
Yeah, so they were in bed with they were in Hitler's army fighting in Barbarossa, killing everyone in Odessa, doing all the horrible things. And then he's like, the Russians looked at my dad's uniform and said he was responsible for a lot of Russians' death. And it's like, yes,
yeah,
yeah, he is. Maybe he shouldn't have done Barbarossa.
It's like that the little old man they have, and the guy's like, Stalin killed my great grandfather, and the little old man's like, oh, good.
Yeah,
Stalin. Your grandfather must have deserved it.
Yeah, he must have deserved it.
And then he said, "Did my grandpa deserve it?" And he's like, "Yes."
I love that guy.
Yeah. So yeah, and yeah, it's always the same case. They're Nazis. It's like never not that case. You know what I mean? From the victims of crime. Yeah. It's always like they're Nazis, and it's always, and I like, but now it seems they're getting ratioed way often. But I wonder why they continue. Like, what keeps them going?
Federal funding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the other thing that people like really love to forget about them. Like, they were established by a congressional order.
Oh my God. So this like monument to Nazis is established by U.S. Congress. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Morning Nazis.
And created by Ziggy Brzezinski.
Well, okay. Well, he was also very interesting because he was the son of this Polish landlord who,
Shocking.
yeah, who lost a lot of money during the Bolshevik Revolution, of course.
Yeah.
And that's where he was anti-communism comes from.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, not that it's any. And then for me, the horrible with Madeleine Albright's book. So what it looks like is that she like tries to make it sound. She tries to make the communists sound so insane, but then her parents literally committed treason, and had cavorted with the Ustazi.
Was she Czech or Hungarian?
Czech.
Okay.
So what happened is that Benet, so her dad was part of the Benet government, and Benet literally would not fight back against Hitler in the Munich Agreement. In fact, Stalin agreed to send millions of troops to fight back to keep that area in the Czechoslovakia. But he said that he would not join unless France and England joined, and then, of course, they would not, and Czechoslovakia got dismantled. So then after World War II and after the concentration camps and the millions of Czechs and Slovakians dying and all the horrors, people in the Benet government were not popular and they did not win the election. And the communists won the election. But what happened was that Madeleine Albright's parents were in London trying to do a Guaido government in exile. And it's just that the people were like, F you. So they were just upset that they couldn't do the Guaido, and no one really wanted them in. And they considered this treason by the communists. And it's like, no, why on earth did you think that you would be allowed back after you dismantled the country, right?
Yeah.
Violence to them is not being able to be a superior to somebody else.
Exactly. Exactly. And so with her, like, and then that's where you get, and then eventually even then the communists are nice enough to give him a position of ambassador to some shitty place. And then he commits treason and defects to the US.
Yeah. Who had that quote that, like, when you spend your life in privilege, equality feels like oppression?
I don't know.
God, who was that? That's driving me nuts. I don't want to Google it because that's cheating.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But basically, that's like, and then you can see her snowflakiness and how she whitewashes. She's like, and my dad was speaking with a bunch of Croatians who wanted an independent state for themselves. And if you're doing that in 1941, who are they?
Yeah.
They are definitely the and it's fun. And she knows that people are not going to want to know that her, like, the fact that she doesn't tell you it's the Ustazi, but that they just wanted an independent Croatian state is like,
you know who they are? They are the people that Stalin didn't put to death and should have.
Okay. Well, okay. Tito actually did a great job. So Yugoslavia,
I mean, that's what Barbara Pitt's for.
Yeah. Tito did a great job. And Yugoslavia is one of the few countries that liberated itself without the help of anyone else. But yeah, Tito did the great job. He definitely pumped them all into Barbara Pitt. He in fact negotiated with the British to get them back, and then the British were like wanted Tito on their side, and then he just dumped them in Barbara Pit.
Chad move.
Yeah, Tito has a lot of Chad moves. But I mean, he kept the country together and he kept it prosperous, and it was a great country. So it's hard to criticize Tito about anything.
His funeral was the largest gathering of world leaders in history. I think it still holds that record.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, everything went downhill after he died.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, somehow they couldn't. Okay, so there's a conspiracy theory that Nixon administration tried to spread that Tito was not actually Yugoslavian because like he spoke his T's with the palate, tata versus ta.
Yeah, he was a Croat, right?
Yeah. But he grew up in Austria, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So he Serbo-Croat, whatever that language is, was not his first language. So yes, he spoke with a strange accent. But the thing is that they were trying to say that when
you're on the European continent, like you all sound funny.
Yeah. Anyways, they tried to say that Tito was not really. It was a really weird birther rumor they tried to spread.
Yeah, they did the same. They did the same thing to Kim Il Sung.
Oh, and Khomeini, and Khomeini, because Khomeini's dad was Indian. He was born in Lucknow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the Shah of Iran tried to claim that Khomeini was actually Indian and not Iranian.
Yipper would like us to do a video on that time period.
On which time period?
Probably Tito is what we were talking
about. Oh, absolutely. That would be an absolute pleasure to do one on Tito and the rise of Yugoslavia.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, we definitely can do it. Right, Matt?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because Milton Friedman once went to Yugoslavia and he's like, oh my God, this is the most efficient form of capitalism. And Tito was like, nope, this is socialism. He praised all the factories and how efficient. And I'm like, Tito was like, no, mate, this is, yeah. And Tito also tried to build a historically black college in this island in Serbia. He gave Josephine Baker like the land and stuff, but
really?
She somehow, yeah, I have an article about it historically about that.
Yeah. You want to finish up this one?
Oh yeah, we can finish this up. I have lots of time today before I go to Moscow. I feel like I want to stay here for a little while. So Matt and I maybe can stay if you get tired. But we'll see. I forgot where I was. Bank. Okay. In actual fact, it is obvious that Kautsky is writing in a country where the police forbid people to laugh in crowds. Otherwise, Kautsky would have been killed by ridicule. Thirdly, I would respectfully remind Mr. Kautsky, who has Marx and... Oh, okay, we got that. We got that too. Okay, that's enough. It is impossible to enumerate all of Kautsky's various absurdities, since every phrase he utters is a bottomless pit of apostasy. Marx and Engels analyzed the Paris Commune in a most detailed manner and showed that its merit lay in its attempt to break up the ready-made state machinery. Marx and Engels considered this conclusion to be so important that this was the only amendment they introduced in the 1872 into the obsolete in parts program of the Communist Manifesto. Marx and Engels showed that the Paris Commune had abolished the army and the bureaucracy, had abolished parliamentarism, had destroyed the parasitic excrescence, the state, etc. But the sage Kautsky, donning his nightcap, repeats the fairy tale about pure democracy, which has been told 1,000 times by liberal professors. No wonder Rosa Luxemburg declared on August 4, 1914, that German social democracy was a stinking corpse. Third subterfuge. When we speak of the dictatorship as a form of government, we cannot speak of the dictatorship of a class, since a class, as we have already pointed out, can only rule but not govern. It is organizations or parties that govern. That is the muddle, a disgusting muddle, Mr. Muddle-headed counselor. Dictatorship is not a form of government. That is ridiculous nonsense. And Marxism does not speak of the form of government, but of the form or type of the state. That is something altogether differently, entirely differently. It is altogether wrong to say that a class cannot govern. Such an absurdity could only have been uttered by a parliamentary cretin who sees nothing but bourgeoisie parliaments and notices nothing but ruling parties. Any European country will provide Kautsky with examples of government by a ruling class, for instance, by the landowners in the Middle Age, in spite of their insufficient organization. To sum up, Kautsky has in the most unparalleled manner distorted the concept dictatorship of the proletariat and has turned Marx into a common liberal. That is, he himself has sunk into the level of a liberal who utters banal phrases about pure democracy, embellishing and glossing over the class content of bourgeoisie democracy, and shrinking above all from the use of revolutionary violence by the oppressed class. By so interpreting the concept of a revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat as to expunge the revolutionary violence of the oppressed class against its oppressors, Kautsky has beaten the world record in the liberal distortion of Marx. The renegade Bernstein has proved to be more of a puppy compared to the renegade Kautsky. Shall we do the next section too?
You want?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm into it. I haven't read this in a really long time.
Okay, so. Okay. Let me just take a water break and check if Press TV has called me break.
But yeah, like you know,
hold on,
dictatorship. Like the word dictatorship. Like if you think of it, like, I mean, dictate is the word.
Hold on, now I need to figure out where I left my phone when taking the water break. Okay, so. Yeah. I left my phone, so I don't know what I'm gonna do because
is it on
I did not leave this room because I have my water bottle here.
Okay, so
give me one more minute, okay?
Did it fall on the floor, or I was eating a cracker, sorry.
What? Matt is typing dots on his Telegram.
He's typing.
I was hoping that your phone would be like binging.
Oh, okay. You're trying to help me find my phone. I get it. Okay. Okay, let's see. Where could my little phone have gone? Found it. Okay. Thank you for typing dots, Matt. It helps. Okay, found it.
Where was it? That's what we need to know.
Apologies for my lack of inability. Now I'm gonna have to put my headset back on.
Yes, Lenin and his cat. He liked cats. He had lots of pictures of Lenin and cats. We actually had Archie Marxist come on here and paint. Did she paint? No, she painted Lenin with a cat a different time.
And then she painted the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
She painted a scene from the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan where it was beautiful. But let me see if there's any cute Lenin. Okay.
She's looking for Lenin and his cats.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see where. Oh, here is Lenin and his cat.
I love that picture.
I love that picture. Adorable. Everything Lenin does is so adorable and cute. Like I said, I was reading the thing like Vespomina memories from his brother, and like I said, when he was 9, he read this book about what they did to the Cherokees.
Yeah.
And in a game, Lenin pretended to be Cherokee and told his brother, "Beware of white people. They will kill you or kidnap you and take you away for a fate that's worse than death," is what he said. Beware of white people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, at age 9. Let me see if there. Oh yeah. Oh, and Lenin. So Lenin's in the Kremlin, his office had like one phone which he had trouble working, and he was always like screaming about like trying to figure out how to dial the telephone.
By the way, Esha's looking. We talked about it at the beginning, but there wasn't really that many people here, so she's looking at what is it? The picture book?
Lenin yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
It's like a picture book.
Yeah, it's a picture. I bought it in Ulyanovsk, which is Lenin, the town where Lenin was born.
So that's what she's looking at.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if there's any cute pictures of any adorable. There. Oh, this is his mugshot.
Yeah.
Do they have the picture of him do they have the picture of him as a baby in there?
Yes, they do. There's only one picture of him as a baby that they took.
Yeah, and unfortunately they have him in a dress, but
he's a pretty baby.
Yeah, I was about to say he was a cute baby, and like I normally don't really find babies that cute.
No, he was a very, very cute baby. And there's literally one picture of him. There's actually 2 pictures of him as a baby. This one, he's actually extremely cute. Can you?
Oh yeah, when he's the family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you figure out which one's Lenin? It's not that hard.
Well, yeah. I mean, you said he was the baby, right?
No, he was no. It's this one's Lenin. This is Olga, his younger sister.
I love
no, that's Dmitry. Sorry, Dmitry. This is Olga. This is no. One.
I love that. Like no one in that family had hair.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. And this is let's see. Here is the cute baby picture. Right?
Yeah.
This is Lenin as a baby.
Yeah. That's actually a different picture than I was thinking.
Yeah, it is. There's another picture of him I
think it's actually on his Wikipedia page.
Yeah. Anyways, it was magical just going there, and I also got to see an actual telegram written by Lenin. Oh my god, I was like so out of this world.
Yes. All right.
Okay, sorry. Let's go back to
She can't stop looking at pictures of Lenin. She's just...
No, I can't stop looking at the picture book of Lenin. And this is not the only picture book I bought. I can show you the other picture book I bought.
Don't lose your phone.
This is called Lenin's Way. Put Lenin means Lenin's way, or like the way he went. And so let me. This has actual like drawings and illustrations and less photographs. So here is an illustration of Lenin reading as a child.
Oh, that's a drawing.
Yeah. Let's see.
Here's
another illustration of Lenin as a child talking to serfs and trying to like make their problems go away. Even
they
as a
didn't
teenager.
even draw him with hair as a kid. couldn't even
Let's see.
It's all right.
This is Lenin in like this is Lenin as like talking to the peasants. Let's see where else. Here is Lenin in St. Petersburg or Petrograd in. This is a drawing of him in Petrograd in 1895. So I did buy a lot of picture books. Let's see what else. Here is Lenin and Nadezhda tutoring kids in Germany in exile.
Yeah.
So they would tutor kids all the time. Oh, this is even better. Like this is Lenin in his exile in Shushenskaya. And because he had a law license, whenever like peasants got in trouble or peasants wanted to like he would use his law license to help them like fight.
They still give. Do they still give away the Nadezhda literacy
in the
award?
UN? Yep, the UN. Yes, what
are we talking
in
about?
the UN? The
His
award
wife.
for the UN culture, whatever heritage. UNESCO award for improvements in literature is called the Nadezhda Krupskaya Award.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's literally the one good thing UNESCO does.
Yeah.
It's not changing the name of that award.
Yeah. And
it was founded by Julian Huxley for the purpose of just basically deciding that, like, we're really limiting ourselves by making eugenics and genocide a race thing. We should do it to everyone.
That's funny. Okay, so here is a drawing, a painting of Lenin reading the Gazette of the period, which means forward. Nice. Yeah. This is an oil painting. Let's see. Oh, this is the Okay, so this is just life for like how life sucked under the Tsar for peasants. And it did.
You should like translate these smaller, like, because they're more picture books. Translate those for Americans and for them to learn, even if they want to learn Russian or to be able to read them, because they're small. Like, there's a lot less text to them, but you have
this picture book has
a revolutionary pop-up book where you pull the tab and like the bullet holes on the Tsar appear and reappear.
I could try that.
Just work it out.
Yeah. Okay. And this is questions for the poor committee, and so basically poor people got to come to the committee and ask, "Yo, what are you going to do to make us not starve to death?"
Yeah.
There's so many pictures. And this is the people reading the first decree of the Soviet, which is the decree on the land, bread, and peace.
Like, even like in monarchies, they had the peasants, not that they listened to them, but they allowed the peasants to come and talk to them. We don't even have that in our.
No. In the Tsar's thing, they had a weird thing where you had like 1/3 of the peasants, like were worth, like peasants' votes were worth 1/3 of the nobles' votes. So there were like 3 or 4 actual peasant deputies.
They had their own 3/5 clause.
Yeah.
Except they were actually voting.
Yes, but so there were like 1 or 2 peasants deputy even in the Tsar's Duma.
Yeah.
And there were some Bolsheviks in the Tsar's Duma too.
Yep.
So it was actually better than the.
We just get form letters back from our representatives.
Like a recurring theme through Russian history that, like, I can't figure it out. I mean, I'm glad it worked out this way, obviously, but like, why didn't the Tsar just have Lenin and Stalin executed for as many times as they went in and out of exile for trying to overthrow the government?
Well, Kerensky said that they just didn't think they were going to be successful, and they didn't want to make martyrs.
That's where I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like they thought it was.
Well, it wasn't even really like
in
in the end. It wasn't even really that they ended up succeeding. It was that the bourgeoisie and the monarchy ended up failing.
Well, it was a lot of the both. World War I really messed things up. And so what happened is that you got so there was two things. The way the Tsar recruited soldiers was that it was by village. So the local aristocracy in the village had to send X number of people to be in the army. But you know who they chose? They chose the troublemakers, the people who irritate. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because and plus, I mean, they were even streamlining the process because they were just automatically conscripting public drunks and
Yeah.
When you were put into the military when
instead of going to jail.
Yeah, exactly. But these are the troublemakers, and so when the Bolsheviks, these people didn't want to be there. But then but then they learned the skills of how to be a good officer, a good soldier.
Yeah.
So then when the Bolsheviks came with the propaganda placards, they were like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And we just need to turn our guns. That's it, easy. And so that was the first thing that kind of made
people have this misconception that's pretty carefully constructed, honestly, of revolution being this long protracted bloody battle and all that, and no, and I mean what it really is handing out sandwiches and then just stepping into the smoking crater when the capitalist government inevitably destroys itself.
Yeah, basically, I mean, more than sandwiches, they taught people how to read.
Well, but I know, but you this is what's called establishing dual power, and that's what got Fred Hampton killed.
Exactly. Okay, so the Bolsheviks did it by having citizens' libraries teaching people how to read, because that was basically not allowed under the Tsar, and that's they had these study circles. So sandwiches. And they also later did some distribution of grain and bread and whatnot. So
people really like it when you give them food.
Basically, what we should be planning for is if they do force us into World War III, to be the ones in the background getting all that stuff ready. And unless World War III is nuclear weapons, but I mean, if that's not the case,
especially if World War III is nuclear
weapons. Nuclear winters are hard to survive afterwards.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to say it because I don't want World War III, but
if it makes you feel any better, we've been living in World War III since 1949.
Yeah. I mean, there has been that, and I think ever since the War on Terror, there has been one group of the world fighting the other, and it's been it hasn't been the whole world, but it has been a large group of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
We just have to wait for our moment.
I wouldn't count on that because
you don't have to wait. You don't have to. Don't wait for the moment. You actually have to do a considerable amount of work to demonstrate credibility. So when you do take over for the fallen bourgeois government, you're credible with enough people that it's considered socially undesirable to shoot you.
Basically. Well, that is the first part. The second part is, of course, a lot of it is when things fall apart. What happens is Katrina with the purge. You're gonna have horror. So
you're gonna have to deal with white terror basically
from happening. And you would rather have the Bolsheviks. When things fall apart, you want the Bolshevik revolution to happen, not the purge with Katrina, where people were shooting
the
black
white
people.
Terror,
So that's the danger of just sitting still. Is
All right, are you guys gonna go into the other? I think I'm gonna jump off only because I just have to check on a few things here.
Sure, we can go into one more paragraph chapter. Are you energetic enough, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay. And because the sun is because the sun. Let me see if I can show you how bright it is.
No, we understand the sun.
Okay, let me see. How do I do this?
Well, usually pointing the camera at it works.
The sun is still shining to the point where it's almost 9 o'clock, and it doesn't feel like 9 o'clock. So I'm left with lots of energy.
Yeah. All right, so you guys go on and do.
But in the wintertime, it has the opposite effect where I'm sleepy at 4 o'clock because the sun's out.
Yeah, it's honestly when you showed me that photo of like what it looked like at like 4 a.m. over there. And yeah, honestly, we're only about like 2 hours behind you, like on that daylight here in Massachusetts. Like it starts to get like Russian 4:30 at like 6:30 here, and I've been noticing like I keep like really fucking myself up on doing stuff because I'll go grocery shopping later. I got a little bit of time, and like I'm like, oh no, the freaking store is gonna close at 9, and it's 8:30 right now, but like the sun is still out. So
I think our sunset was 8:06 last night.
Yeah.
Okay, so here it's like well into
and that's not even going to be the longest day of the year.
Yeah, and on June 21st, it's never going to go out. So so it's
How long do you have white night over there?
For a whole week, I think.
Okay, well that's not bad. It's like there are some places in Alaska where it's way worse.
Yeah. So this is why I probably have a lot of energy today, and I guess I missed you guys.
So you're solar
powered. All right, so you guys do the next chapter, and then we'll come back next week, and we could probably finish it next week if you have as much energy. And
we'll see how much energy I'll have next week.
Having 3 hours then, and then
have we already broadcasted for 3 hours?
No, we're only 2 hours now, but you guys are gonna like read, so you're gonna be about 2.5, 3 hours, and then I think we could finish it in another week if we did the same thing.
Okay.
If I'm looking
good
at
for me.
All right, so bye everyone, and thank you. This was a good.
And please stay on and become a paid. But please hit like, subscribe, and recommend to your friends and share this. And also go to historically.net and become a paid subscriber. Okay.
Yes.
Bourgeoisie and proletarian democracy. The question which Kautsky has so shamelessly muddled really stands as follows. If we are not to mock at common sense and history, it is obvious that we cannot speak of pure democracy as long as different classes exist. We can only speak of class democracy. Let us say in parentheses that pure democracy is not only an ignorant phrase, revealing a lack of understanding both of the class struggle and of the nature of the state, but also a thrice empty phrase. Since in communist society, democracy will wither away in the process of changing and becoming a habit, but it will never be pure democracy. Pure democracy is a mendacious phase of a liberal who wants to fool the workers. History knows of bourgeoisie democracy, which takes the place of feudalism, and of proletarian democracy, which takes the place of the bourgeoisie democracy. When Kautsky devotes dozens of pages to proving the truth that bourgeoisie democracy is progressive compared to medievalism, and that the proletariat must unfailingly utilize it in its struggle against the bourgeoisie, that is, in fact, is just liberal twaddle intended to fool workers. This is a truism, not only for educated Germany, but also for uneducated Russia. Kautsky is simply throwing learned dust in the eyes of the workers when with a pompous mane, he talks about the weaklings in the Jesuits of Paraguay and many other things in order to avoid telling about the bourgeoisie essence of modern capitalist democracy. This is so true.
Yes.
And let's use this one. And let's see. I have wallpaper EA. I have that on EAS, my wallpaper. What wallpaper?
EAS.
I don't understand what that means, but oh well. Let's see. Okay, so we'll see. Okay, we'll continue. Okay, I have so much energy today. Maybe I'm also a little bit nervous about the mystery conference tomorrow in Moscow. What?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a whole thing. I mean, we're like you're going to a place with like security clearance.
Yeah. It's just that I don't know where it is, and so I'm going to be driven to a strange place. So a driver is going to meet me there. So it's a conference about political repression in Ukraine, which I'll be speaking on Thursday. I have a trouble of narrowing. The topic is so big, I could speak for hours about it. It's just hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a long conference. Like.
Yeah. So then I'm talking about violent militias used to repress political repression, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways,
White terrorists.
Yeah, white terrorists, exactly. And then I'm going to be so the thing is that apparently they're worried about security. So I actually don't know where the conference is. They'll just drive me to the conference from the train station. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the best way to make sure that you're not the topic at the next conference on political repression in Ukraine.
True.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's so yeah. So I was just given the instruction to meet this person at my train station when my train comes to Moscow, and after that they'll drive me, and then I guess I will be speaking in the conference, and then once the conference is over, it'll be for 2 days. Yeah. It's just that no one knows where it is.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, no one who's, and this is the first time. This is the first time where the security's been that tight, where the speakers don't know where the conference is.
Yeah, that's wild.
But they are paying for the train and hotel, so I can't complain about that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's like that's also a decent way to like show like some degree of legitimacy. Like, so it doesn't seem like so sketchy, like what's happening before, like, you get in the car with a stranger to go to an undisclosed location in Russia.
Yeah, that is true. Yes, getting exactly to go to
not to make you even more excitable than you already are.
Exactly. Okay. Kautsky takes from Marxism what is acceptable to liberals and to the bourgeoisie, the criticism of the Middle Ages, and the progressive historical role of capitalism in general, and of capitalist democracy in particular, and discards, passes over in silence, glosses over all that in Marxism which is unacceptable to the bourgeoisie, the revolutionary violence of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie for the latter's destruction. That is why Kautsky, by virtue of his objective position and irrespective of what his subjective convictions may be, inevitably proves to be a lackey of the bourgeoisie, and by extension, Jacobin magazine.
Yeah.
Bourgeoisie democracy, although a great historical advance in comparison with medievalism, has always remains, and under capitalism is bound to remain, restricted, truncated, false, and hypocritical. A paradise for the rich and a snare and deception for the exploited and for the poor. That is so true.
Yep.
It is this truth which forms a most essential part of Marxist teaching that Kautsky, the Marxist, has failed to understand. On this, the fundamental issue Kautsky offers delights for the bourgeoisie instead of scientific criticism of the conditions which make every bourgeoisie democracy a democracy for the rich. Michael Parenti wrote Democracy for the Few, and that's what he meant. My God.
Yeah, that's a good book, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great book.
It's on its like 9th or 10th edition right now, because they edited it as an academic textbook.
Yeah.
So and I think they did that to like keep people from reading it, but the audiobook is on YouTube.
Yeah, it's great. Not only the ancient and feudal, but also the modern representative state in an instrument of exploitation of a wage labor by capital, Engels in his work on the state. As therefore, the state is only a transition institution which is used in the struggle in the revolution to hold down one's adversaries by force. It is sheer nonsense to talk of a free people's state. So long as the proletariat still need the state, it does not need it to hold the interests of freedom, but in order to hold down its adversaries. As soon as it becomes possible to speak of freedom, the state as such ceases to exist. That's exactly true, too. The state is meant to suppress one class over another. Repress, suppress, oppress. I don't know. What's the word?
Suppress.
Suppress. Okay.
Yeah, okay. So, like, I actually did look this up. So the verb is to suppress. The people who are being suppressed are the oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think repression is that's not really like, that's a different thing.
It's like a noun.
Yeah. Thank you. And usually in speech it's used more personally than politically.
Okay.
But yeah. So if it's a verb, it's suppression. If you're talking about the target of the suppression, that is the oppressed.
Okay. Engels, in his work on the state, Mr. Kautsky very tediously chews over the cud, more cow analogies, in the first part of this proposition, which is acceptable to the bourgeoisie. But the second part, which we have italicized, it cannot and never be and never will be anything more than in the present state. Is not acceptable to the bourgeoisie. The renegade Kautsky passes over in silence. The commune was to be working not a parliamentary body, executive and legislative at the same time. Instead of deciding once in 3 or 6 years which members of the ruling class was to represent and suppress the people in parliament, universal suffrage was to serve the people, constituted in communes as individual suffrage serves every other employer in search for workers, foremen, and accountants for his businesses. Marx in the work on the Paris Commune. Every one of these propositions, which are excellently loaned to the most learned Mr. Kautsky, is a slap in his face and lays bare his apostasy. Nowhere in his pamphlet does Kautsky reveal the slightest understanding of these truths. His whole pamphlet is a sheer mockery of Marxism. Take the fundamental laws of modern states, take their administration, take the freedom of assembly, freedom of press, or equality of all citizens before the law. You will see at every turn evidence of the hypocrisy of the bourgeoisie democracy with which every honest class-conscious worker is familiar. I mean, what freedom of assembly? Black Lives Matter does not have freedom of assembly. Freedom of press, Assange. Equality of law before, that's a joke. Yeah. There is not a single state, however democratic, which has no loopholes or reservations in its constitution guaranteeing the bourgeoisie the possibility of dispatching troops against the workers and of proclaiming martial law, the 13th Amendment. And so forth, in case of a violation of public order, and actually in case the exploited class violates its position of slavery and tries to behave in a non-slavish manner. My God. This is basically true.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
That's the 13th Amendment, essentially. Kautsky shamelessly embellishes bourgeoisie democracy and omits to mention, for instance, how the most democratic and republican bourgeoisie in America or Switzerland deal with workers on strike. Bang, 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 bang. The wise and learned Kautskys keep silent about these things. That learned politician does not realize that to remain silent on this matter is despicable. He prefers to tell workers nursery tales of the kind of democracy that means protecting the minority. And in the U.S. Constitution, the protecting the minority is literally slave owners or property owners.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, every time.
The way liberals will describe it academically is what is democracy is when majority rule is tempered by minority rights. And
but
the minority they're talking about are the slave owners, real estate speculators.
Yeah. But they want you to think something like Jews and and Yazdis or whatever, but that's never the case. Madison literally says the opulent minority, because he knows that if you have democracy, people will vote not to be poor and exploited. So the entire purpose of the state is to protect those with property from those without. That's in the Madison's papers, in the Federalist Papers, literally.
Number 10.
Yes. So that is the bullshit of the protection of minority. It is incredible, but it is a fact. In the year of our Lord 1918, in the 5th year of the world imperialist slaughter and the strangulation of internationalist minorities, i.e. those who have not despicably betrayed socialism, like the Renaudels and the Lungwets and the Schneidemans and the Kautskys, the Hendersons and the Webbs, in all democracies of the world, the learned Mr. Kautsky sweetly and very sweetly sings the praise of protection of the minority. Of those who are interested may read this on page 15 of Kautsky's pamphlet, and on page 16, this learned individual tells you about the Whigs and Tories in England in the 18th century.
Amazing.
Yeah. What a wonderful erudition. What a refined servility to the bourgeoisie. What civilized belly crawling before the capitalists and bootlicking. If I were Krupp, Schneiderman, or Clementiu or Renadel, I would pay Mr. Kautsky millions, reward him with Judas kisses, praise him before the workers, and urge socialist unity with honorable men like him. To write pamphlets against the dictatorship of the proletariat, to talk about the Whigs and Tories in England in the 18th century, to assert that democracy means protecting minority, and remain silent about pogroms against internationalists in the Democratic Republic of America. This isn't this rendering lackey service to the bourgeoisie? Yeah. In America in 1918, they had the Palmer raids where they just like mass crackdown on all socialists.
Yep. If you look up a total ass clown named Big Bill Haywood, he was ostensibly a labor organizer who, he was going to go to prison for being a union leader, basically.
Yeah, no, but then there's Joe Hill that they killed, and then his last words were "Don't mourn, fight back," or something like that. Joe Hill, he was and then they deported a lot of them back to where, like, they didn't really. And by the way, a lot of the workers, when they came, like, and Nadezhda wrote about it in her book, they would like often you know how people say they would like bring workers came from Europe, that Eastern Europe. That was not what they did. They would often just like literally like kidnap them.
Yep.
And just like send them to America, and because they were poor and unread, there wasn't much to do.
Yeah, no. That's why like the Midwest up around like Minnesota and all that is like full of Swedes and Finns.
Yeah, they were not kidnapped, they were sold.
Yeah, Mannerheim sold them
into slavery. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like and of course everyone ignores. I mean, you can figure this out if you read even the New York Times every day in 1918. If you read all these articles, they'll talk about all these like random kidnapped people from random countries, all the things, but it just never makes it to the dominant historical narrative.
Right.
But the Red Terror, which is mostly an advertising campaign to scare the bourgeoisie, does. White Terror doesn't, when they cut off the breasts and legs and arms of peasants and let them bleed to death.
Well, it just shows that the marketing worked.
For the Red Terror? Yeah, the marketing worked for the Red Terror. Genghis Khan's also did a lot of marketing where a lot of people just like surrendered because they were like all this horror. And the thing about it is that Genghis Khan had one of the most egalitarian governments where you could be it didn't matter what ethnicity you were, like anyone could be the head. So people were actually better off with them under Mongol rule, but he also had that where it was like scare tactic against white people. Okay. The learned Mr. Kautsky has accidentally forgotten, probably a trifle, namely that ruling party in a bourgeoisie democracy extends the protection of the minority to another bourgeoisie party. Lenin never misses. While the proletariat in all serious, profound, and fundamental issues get martial law or pogroms instead of the protection of the minority. He's right.
Yeah.
The more highly developed a democracy is, the more imminent are pogroms or civil war in connection with any profound political divergence which is dangerous to the bourgeoisie. Lenin is right about that too.
Yep.
Yeah. The learned Mr. Kautsky could have studied this law of the bourgeoisie democracy in connection with the Dreyfus case in the Republic of France, or with the lynching of Negroes and internationalists in the Democratic Republic of America. He's not missing.
Nope.
In the case of Ireland and Ulster in democratic Britain, and with the baiting of the Bolsheviks and staging of pogroms against them in April 1917 in the Democratic Republic of Russia. I have purposely chosen examples not only from wartime, but also from pre-wartime peacetime. But mealy-mouthed Mr. Kautsky prefers to shut his eyes to the fact of the 20th century, instead to tell the workers wonderfully new, remarkably interesting, unusually edifying, and incredibly important things about the Whigs and Tories of the 18th century. Take the bourgeoisie parliament. Can it be that learned Kautsky has never developed the more highly democracy, has never heard that the more highly democracy is developed, the more the bourgeoisie parliaments are subjected by the stock exchange and the bankers. Wow, he does not miss.
Nope.
He says the more developed the democracies, the more they are ruled by stock exchange and the bankers.
Yeah, well, I mean, liberal democracy anyway.
Yeah, he's not missing. Okay. This does not mean that we must not make use of bourgeoisie parliaments. Bolsheviks made use of it better use of it than probably any other party in the world. For in 1912 to 1914, we won entire workers' curia in the Fourth Duma. But it doesn't mean that only a liberal can forget the historical limitations and conventional nature of bourgeoisie parliamentary system, as Kautsky does. Even in the most democratic bourgeoisie state, the oppressed people at every step encountered the crying contradiction between the formal equality proclaimed by the democracy of the capitalists and the thousands of real limitations and subterfuges which turned the proletariat into wage slaves. It is precisely this contradiction that is opening the eyes of the people to the rottenness, mendacity, and hypocrisy of capitalism. It is this contradiction that agitators and propagandists of socialism are constantly exposing to the people in order to prepare them for revolution. And now that the era of revolution has begun, Kautsky turns his back upon it and begins to extol the charms of moribund bourgeoisie democracy. Proletarian democracy, of which Soviet government is one of the forms, has brought a development and expansion of democracy unprecedented in the world. For the vast majority of the population, for the exploited and the working people, to write a whole pamphlet about democracy, as Kautsky did, in which 2 pages are devoted to dictatorship and dozens to pure democracy, and fails to notice this fact, means completely distorting the subject in a liberal fashion. Take foreign policy. Oh, I'm going to love this. In a bourgeoisie state, not even in the most democratic is conducted openly. Okay. In no bourgeoisie state, not even in the most democratic, is it conducted openly. America is a great example. The people are deceived everywhere. Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, exactly. Yeah. And in democratic France, Switzerland, America, and Britain, this is done on an incomparably wider scale and incomparably subtler manners than in other countries. No arguments about the incubator babies, no wider scale. No. The Soviet government has torn the veil of mystery from foreign policy in a revolutionary manner. Kautsky has not noticed this. He keeps silent about it. Although in an era of predatory wars and secret treaties for the division of spheres of influence and for the partition of the world among capitalist bandits, this is of cardinal importance. For on it depends a question of peace and life and death of tens of millions of people. Take the structure of the state. Kautsky picks at all manner of trifles down to the argument that under the Soviet constitution, elections are indirect, but he misses the point. He fails to see the class nature of the state apparatus and of the machinery of the state. Under bourgeoisie democracy, the capitalists, by thousands of tricks, which are more artful and effective the more pure the democracy is, drive people away from administrative work, from the freedom of press, freedom of assembly. The Soviet government is the first in world, or strictly speaking, second, because the Paris Commune began to do the same thing, to enlist the people, specifically the exploited people, in the work of administration. Yeah. Actually, another thing is that look at Joseph Stalin's thing on the press, and he explains how the press is supposed to look and help strengthen the government by like exploiting the weaknesses and stuff like that. So he like encourages the press to be ruthless and honest and the working people are barred from participation in bourgeoisie parliaments. They never decide important questions under bourgeoisie democracy, which are decided by stock exchanges and the banks. No. By thousands of obstacles. And the workers know and feel and see and realize perfectly well that the bourgeoisie parliaments are institutions alien to them, instruments for the oppression of the workers by the bourgeoisie, institutions of a hostile class, of the exploiting minority. The Soviets are the direct organization of the working and exploited people, which helps them to organize and administer their own state in every possible way. And in this, it is the vanguard of the working and exploited people, the urban proletariat, that enjoy the advantage of being best united by large enterprises. It is easy for it than all the others to elect and exercise control over those elected. The Soviet form of organization automatically helps to unite all the working and exploited people around their vanguard, the proletariat, the old bourgeoisie apparatus, the bureaucracy, the privileges of wealth, of bourgeoisie education, of social connection. These real privileges are the more varied and more highly bourgeois. These real privileges are more varied, the more highly bourgeoisie the democracy is developed. All this disappears under the Soviet form of organization. Freedom of press ceases to be hypocrisy because the printing plants, and the stocks of paper are taken away from the bourgeoisie. The same applies to the best buildings, palaces, and mansions and manor houses. Soviet power took thousands upon thousands of these best buildings from the exploiters at one stroke. In this way, it made the right of assembly, without which democracy is fraud, a million times more democratic for people. Indirect elections to non-local Soviets makes it easier to hold congresses of Soviets. They make entire apparatus less costly, more flexible, more accessible to the workers and peasants at the same time when life is seething and it is necessary to be able to quickly recall one's local deputy or delegate him to a general congress of Soviets. Yeah. Another thing is that I was reading this. In order for the monasteries to stay open, Lenin had a condition that they had to take in homeless children and take care of them if they wanted to basically still be like monks. They're like, okay, you could be monks, but you're going to have to take in some homeless children. Is the condition he put them in? Yeah.
Religious oppression.
Yeah. I had to pay for my kidnappers' gas in the States, capitalism. Yeah, that's Lenin uses that analogy too about the bank robber, about the people who, what is it like? If like somebody robs your car and then they like versus like aiding and abetting the car robber.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and that's religious oppression. Yeah, exactly. Like it's always like some crying snowflake. I had to take care of homeless children instead of enslaving them. Proletarian democracy is a million times more democratic than any bourgeoisie democracy. Soviet power is a million times more democratic than the most democratic bourgeoisie republic. To fail to see this, one must deliberately serve the bourgeoisie or be politically dead as a doornail, unable to see real life from behind the dusty pages of bourgeoisie books, or be thoroughly imbued with bourgeoisie democratic prejudices and thereby objectively convert oneself into the lackey of the bourgeoisie. To fail to see this, one must be incapable of presenting the question from the point of view of the oppressed classes. Yep. Is there a single country in the world, even among the most democratic bourgeoisie countries, in which average rank-and-file worker, the average rank-and-file farm laborer, or village semi-proletarian, generally the representative of the oppressed of the overwhelming majority of the population, enjoys anything approaching liberty of holding meetings in the best buildings? Such liberty of using large printing plants and big stocks of paper to express his ideas and to defend his interests, such of liberty and promoting men and women of his own class to administer and knock into shape the state as in Soviet Russia? It is ridiculous to think that Mr. Kautsky could in any country, even one of 1,000 of well-informed workers or farm laborers who have any doubt as to this reply. Instinctively, from hearing fragments of the admissions of the truth from the bourgeoisie press, the workers of the world sympathize with the Soviet Republic precisely because they regard it as a proletarian democracy, a democracy for the poor, not a democracy for the rich, that every bourgeoisie democracy, even the best, actually is. Can't disagree with that.
Nope.
We are governed by bourgeoisie bureaucrats, by bourgeoisie members of parliament, by bourgeoisie judges. Such a simple, obvious, and indisputable truth, which tens and hundreds of millions of people belong to the oppressed classes in all bourgeoisie countries, including the most democratic. Know from their experience, feel, and realize every day in Russia, however, the bureaucratic machine has been completely smashed and razed to the ground. The old judges have all been sent packing. The bourgeoisie parliament has been dispressed and far more accessible representation has been given to the workers and peasants. Their Soviets have replaced the bureaucrats, or their Soviets have been put in control of the bureaucrats, and their Soviets have been authorized to elect the judges. This fact alone is for all the oppressed classes to recognize that Soviet power, i.e. the present form of the dictatorship of the proletariat, is 1,000,000 times more democratic than the most democratic bourgeoisie republic. Kautsky does not understand this truth, which is so clear and so obvious to every worker because he has unlearned to put the question, democracy for which class? He argues from the point of view of pure democracy, i.e. the non-class, above class democracy. He argues like Shylock, my pound of flesh and nothing else. Equality for all citizens, otherwise there's no democracy. We must ask the learned Kautsky, the Marxist and socialist Kautsky, can there ever be equality between the exploited and exploiters? No. That's like Kafsanjani, Ghanim Kafsanjani, who says, can there be a negotiation between the sword and the neck? Remember that?
Hassan Kanafani.
Hassan Kanafani, what did he say?
Negotiation. There can be no negotiation between a knife and the neck.
Yeah, the knife.
Yeah, he said that in reference to
Israel and Palestine.
Israel and Palestinian peace talks.
Exactly. And this BBC reporter was like, negotiate. And he's like, negotiate with whom? But this kind of reminds me of exactly that. Okay. It is dreadful. It is incredible that such questions should have to be put in discussing a book written by the ideological leader of the Second International. But by having put your hand to the plow, don't look back. And having undertaken to write about Kautsky, I must explain to the learned man why there can be no equality between the exploiter and the exploited. So we go on?
I actually have some errands to run.
Okay.
So I think I have to call it here. If you want to keep reading, and you go nuts, obviously.
I get lonely when I'm alone, so I don't like streaming alone. So shall we stay for like? Do we have? Okay, let's just make quick announcements. Join us.
Join Historically as a paid subscriber.
Historically.net.
Historically.net as a paid subscriber. Follow me on Twitter, uncle_authority. Read my articles, M. Fergus Gawain on historically.net. Asha and I have a new one that we wrote together called Narrative Reification. That's pretty good, if I do say so myself.
Exactly. And then also check out 100-Year-Old Bone Cell, where we make fun of the Western
headlines.
The day's headlines. Last week we spoke about batshit. At 12:30 Eastern Time on Sundays. And then please check us out for Lit with Lenin at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Moscow time on Mondays.
Yes. Excellent.
Okay.
All right.
With that, I would say Svobodom Narodu Smrti Fascismu.
Slava Lenino.